This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 3, Episode 209 of the jumbleThink podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the jumbleThink podcast, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers about how they turn their dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we'll share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's episode is Ben Flanner, co-founder of Brooklyn Grange. More about Ben in a moment. Whether you are a new listener to the jumbleThink podcast or you've been listening to us for a long time and you haven't subscribed already, I want to encourage you, head on over to wherever you like to listen to podcasts and click that magical subscribe button and leave us a rating review. If you want to listen to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, simply go to jumblethink.com/iTunes, and for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. Take you right to the app, right to where you can subscribe and rate and review our podcast. Now let's jump into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to the jumbleThink podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a very, very fun episode lined up for you today. Before we get going, I want to thank our sponsors for today's episode, Mighty Travels, Floxy, and OpportunityInChina.com. In a little bit, I'll be telling you a little bit more about them. Our guest on today's episode is Ben Flanner. Now, I've wanted to have Ben on the podcast since early on in Season 1 of the jumbleThink podcast, and we've been emailing back and forth over the last couple years. Well, I'm so excited to be able to bring his story to you in today's episode. It was a fun episode. I went up to New York City, met with him, interviewed him on one of their rooftops where they farm. I want to give you a little bit of information before we jump into the interview about who Ben is and what Brooklyn Grange is doing. Ben Flanner is a co-founder and CEO of Brooklyn Grange, based in New York City. A pioneering urban farm operation, the business farms rooftops, designs and builds green spaces, and promotes sustainable living and local ecology through food, education, and events. The business includes over 3 acres of intensive green roofs and sells its produce via restaurants, farmers markets, and CSAs. Brooklyn Grange is widely recognized as a world leader in urban agriculture with an unwavering drive to develop the concept with an exceptional, green, and community-minded business. Ben's experience in gardening began at a young age alongside his mother in their Wisconsin backyard. After earning his BS in industrial engineering from the University of Wisconsin, Ben moved to New York City, where he began a short career in management consulting and then financial marketing, notably at E-Trade Financial. But his desire to engage more with community than numbers and more parts of his body than his brain drew him to the world of food and farming. Ben has presented to audiences including NYU Stern Business School, Central European University, American Farmland Trust, U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, Northeast Organic Farming Association, Slow Money, Barcelona's Smart City World Expo, MAHA Agricultural Conference in Malaysia, the American Farm School in Thessalonica, Greece, numerous Northeastern horticulture societies, and has been a guest expert on dozens of panels and university classes. He was included in 2016 by the New York City Food Policies Center's 40 Under 40 Working to Transform New York City's Food Policies. Bennett is a juror on the International Architizers A+ Awards, and he has taught urban agriculture courses in multiple cities in North America and a course in the Environmental Studies Department at New York University. When he's not meeting with soil scientists to develop a better growing mix or tinkering with a fussy irrigation pump, Ben can be found whipping up a batch of his homemade bitters or lacto-fermenting whatever is in season at his Crown Heights, Brooklyn apartment. Let's go ahead and jump into today's conversation with our guest, Ben Flanner. Hey, Ben, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so there's a lot to that story, a lot to your story. I want to get into the dirt, if you will, pun intended, of course, of your story, and talk a little bit about how you became an entrepreneur. That's what you really are in the farming space. When that's not the direction you first started out going, you were looking at something different. You said, "Hey, I want to pivot here." What happened?
Well, I joined the workforce and moved out to New York City, and I think one of the most simple but also telltale things that I was having a challenge with was what I was sitting at a desk all day, and the temperature would be so cold with the air conditioner, and my hand, especially the hand that was on my mouse, was always cold, like just cold all day long. And I just didn't really think it was good for my body, and I was having some other circulation issues.
Wow.
and my back would hurt a bit, and I just felt like I've been doing this for 1 year, 2 years, and then the third year passed, and it was like, this isn't my future for sure.
Yeah.
Also, I had the kind of fortune to be staffed on a project where I worked at a winery in Australia for about 4 months.
Wow.
And I was really inspired by some of the things I saw happening in the viticulture with the grape growing.
Yeah.
And that really started to kind of plant the seed for me that agriculture would be a pretty interesting thing to get into.
Yeah, we're actually sitting on the rooftop in January in New York City in one of their old offices. So if you hear a little bit of a fan in the background, it's because when Ben talks about it being cold, it's cold up here today.
Right. Ironically.
Yes. So now
hopefully we won't sit for very long.
That's right. That's right. You have a beautiful location. I was looking at it. It's, of course, in a dormant state for most of it, although the greenhouses that you have here. But it overlooks the city. And what I love about what you've created is that you've created a farm. You've pioneered a new way of farming with rooftop agriculture, soil-based rooftop agriculture in a city, in an urban setting. But beyond that, one of the things that you've done, and it's so significant to the story, is build community. And, so often we think about, in most of America, unless you're like in middle America or somewhere where you're actually working on a farm, you don't really think about, for most people, where your food comes from and how that impacts your community and how that impacts the world. So tell us about the intertwining of community and food and farming and how that all comes together.
Yeah, it's really important, and that's been one of the core tenets of our business and our mission too, is educating people and creating awareness about our food system, because that is an important and a greater good that far exceeds the amount that of food that we grow, for that example. But there's millions of people living in cities, and tons and tons of future demand with our children, and they'll be making decisions about what they put in their bodies and what they spend money on and what they eat and how they nourish themselves, and that's obviously a really critical element of doing something like this in the city. We also have other practical elements. There's environmental benefits to green roofs. There's ecosystem services that are provided by a space like this, but obviously huge social connections too.
Yeah. All right, I want to get into the story of Brooklyn Grange, how the idea came to be. So tell us a little bit about that story. You're working in the traditional job path that most people would go into, some kind of corporate or working in an office, and you're sharing about, hey, things weren't working, your hands were cramping up, it was too cold, it wasn't feeling great, and you say, you know what, I got to do something else. So how did this spark of this idea of like, maybe let's put a farm on a roof in Brooklyn or Queens happen?
It is a bit of a leap. Well, I was always also really passionate about cooking and eating. I used to work in restaurants when I was a little bit younger in university, and several of my friends were involved in restaurants too, and we'd cook together, and so I was very much around vegetables and just kind of, I guess you could say, just interested in them in general. And we started taking trips every once in a while, and I still remember the first time I really explored a small diversified organic farm, diversified vegetable farm, because I had grown up in the Midwest around some areas that were sort of fizzling farm fields, but that's mostly just corn,
Yeah.
you know, a little bit of cattle grazing, a little bit of grazing, soybeans and whatnot. But the first time I visited a diversified organic vegetable farm, and you see 100 different crops and all these different rows of beautiful colors and different plants at different stages of their lives, and then you start sort of asking those next questions about looking at systems and tools and weeding mechanisms and stuff, and it's just absolutely fascinating and a little bit mind-blowing. And it really hooked me, and it was pretty quickly after visiting a few farms that I started starting to whisper to some friends like, hey, I think I want to be a farmer. And then of course the general plan was to leave the city because there's not a lot of farms in the city.
No.
But then the rooftop idea kind of kept on coming back, and you know, we'd look up and see all these different roofs, and there's thousands of them, and some of them are huge and flat with full sun exposure.
Yeah.
And it made sense to give it a shot.
We were talking a little bit before we started the interview, and I was saying, how in the world do you even approach a building owner or a management company and say, you know what, we have an idea. It's a little out there. No one's really doing it, because you pioneered a lot of that, especially in New York City, where you say, what about putting a farm on your roof at wherever?
Right.
We're in the Brooklyn, Brooklyn Navy Yard here, and
Yep.
that's your big location right now. But you must have had some interesting conversations, interesting challenges to tell this story and say, I think we can do something pretty amazing here.
Yeah. It definitely was eye-catching because we had a business plan with photos and layouts of what it will look like. And it was also during the recession in 2009 and 10. And people were really excited about this kind of new use for our roofs and anything innovative and that seemed like it was going to be good for resource conservation and the environment definitely caught eyes. And of course, with the economy not being super strong at that time, landlords would turn their heads when they thought about an additional revenue stream for the rent that could be paid on their roofs. But also, of course, a lot of people thought we were crazy, and tons of people would say, "Oh, the roof's going to cave in and whatnot." But we have a lot of, there's very clear ways to look at the engineering of the building and to make sure it'll support the weight. And then also, the green roof industry had been really evolving for several decades at that point. So we didn't really invent the wheel in terms of installing a green roof on the top of a building.
Yeah.
But we did pioneer signing a lease and running it as a commercial farming operation.
Yeah. I think my first experience of a green roof environment was in San Francisco at one of the museums there.
Oh, yeah.
And being up there and just going, okay, this is kind of weird to see like rolling hills with grass on them and trees and stuff. But I just love that concept of doing something that's out of the norm. It's probably great for the city from the standpoint of you're doing something here that brings education to people that might not engage with. I remember a friend of mine's a nutritionist, and she goes into schools and a lot of urban schools, and she goes, do you know what this is? And they're like, well, I don't know. And because their food, they don't know what it looks like or where it came from or how it grows. And it broke her heart to talk to these kids and be like, this is an apple. It comes from a tree, and that kind of thing. So in doing this, there's been a lot of education that you've had to do about how this impacts the city. So how does having a farm in a city actually impact it?
Well, the farm impacts the city in the produce that we grow, the workshops that we have, the events, the teaching and the learning that happens at our farm between learning how to farm, but also just learning about other workshop topics that we have. We teach about beekeeping and planting gardens and natural dyes and healthy eating and whatnot. But also the green roof industry and the concept of the green roof is larger still, much larger still. And that is the much more broad idea of putting vegetation and soil on top of a roof space.
Yeah.
Because that has huge benefits to our cities right now, especially as we become more and more built up and more populated, and we have more and more impermeable spaces because we have sewer systems that overflow. Yeah. When we get heavy rains and they mix with our sewage from our homes and businesses, and it overruns the water treatment plants, and it ends up getting dumped into the nearby waterways and whatnot. So it's actually hugely important that we make our city more of a sponge.
Yeah.
Us and many other cities across the country, in order to manage some of that stormwater.
Yeah.
And it also has the ability to reduce the temperature around it, thus slightly combating the urban heat island effect, and also reducing the amount of energy that we have to consume in those dog days, particularly in those dog days of summer.
Yeah.
When that sun would just be beating down on the roof, but now we have a plant canopy and some moisture and some evapotranspiration happening.
Yeah. And for me, I lived in Northern California for 13 years, and I lived in this town called Chico, which is right where the wildfires just happened this last year. And I always thought, okay, I hear about like how there's a thermal footprint to a city, and Chico's not a big city; it's like 130,000 people. But when you drove 10 minutes outside of town into the almond orchards, or almonds as they call them out there, or the rice fields, all of a sudden the temperature would drop like 10 or 15 degrees sometimes. So
it's a significant thing.
Yeah, it's crazy, and when you experience it, you go, "There's something to this." For you, as you do this and people experience the farm, as they experience what you're able to offer the community, as they experience on the benefits to it, has it sparked others to think differently about solving unique problems that they're facing, whether it's through food sourcing or through just creative solutions to unique problems?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Through the course of this, since we started this business, we've attracted a really interesting sort of medley of different people that have thought this was a cool idea, and wanted to come up and learn and seek tours and consulting and whatnot. And it's varied from the agricultural industry to people more focused on farming and food production, to also city planners and architects, school teachers, children's groups. It's had a nice broad reach, and I think it's because it is very multifaceted.
Yeah.
Because we have a social component of it, an events component, the agriculture component, and then we also build green roofs and green spaces offsite. So it's been a really interesting ride in that regard, meeting a lot of people. Yeah,
for sure. And I was walking around this rooftop. You have two locations right now that are fully up and running, one in Brooklyn, one in Queens, Long Island City, right? And you're starting a third?
Yes, we are.
Wow. So tell us about, you're talking about the diversification of the kind of things you grow here, and how the plants are in different stages of growth, and how you're turning that. Tell us the kind of things you grow on an urban, roof-centered farm.
Well, we grow a diversified vegetable mix. Now, we also do focus on certain crops that are higher profitability for us, and higher demand.
You want it to be sustainable.
Exactly. Yeah. From a financial side, that's important, because we also do have some costs in the city, but also just makes sense from an entrepreneur's standpoint.
Yeah.
And then also, very logically, we're going to grow a lot more towards the type of crops that are very perishable.
Yeah.
Because here we are within 5 miles. Nothing gets transported more than 5 miles, and everything finds a home within a day or two of it being harvested. So we're not shipping things across the country. So we don't obviously need to pick our tomatoes green and then box them up and prepare them for a 10-day journey or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we really do. We have a lot of salad mixes. Arugula is kind of our specialty, as well as our blend that we make of salad mix. We grow a lot of chard, kale, lots of tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, radishes, turnips, carrots. It's basically going to span the gambit of different vegetables that you'd imagine, with a few that we don't grow. Because either we just have decided we're not that good at them, or the financials don't work so well, or they take up a lot of space.
Yeah.
And time.
Yeah.
And time is a critical element of our crop selection as well, too.
Wow. All right. So what is you're growing things year round, because I was just in a couple of your greenhouses, and you're working on a new greenhouse for next year. So you're growing year round, but what would you say is your traditional growing season as you would typically see?
Right. Well, in our zone and in the Northeast here in New York City, we're basically, we have things growing from about March to November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's
And there's a bell curve of production yield that basically centers around August and September.
yeah. What kind of team do you have here? Is it all paid people that work here? Because you're not going to have tractors. You're not
Right.
going to have big machinery up
Not
here.
a lot of big tools, yeah.
No, so it probably takes a lot of manpower to do this, I would assume.
Yeah. That's actually something we've been really putting a lot of focus into. On the tool front, we have some really innovative small farm, small tools
Yeah.
that make our jobs a lot easier. One
Yeah.
of them's actually right behind you here in this office. That's a automatic greens harvester that runs off
Oh,
of
wow.
a DeWalt drill.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be DeWalt, but power drill.
They should sponsor you, though.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, that would be pretty cool.
And then we have across the business we have about 16 full-time employees.
Yeah.
But that probably on average will double
Wow.
seasonally when we get into the peak of our season, and that's not just farming, but that's events and our consulting and our design and installation business. On the farm front, it's about 5 or so full-time, and then about doubling that ish in the season, a little bit more.
Okay. All right. So you do have like what you would have in a traditional farm, where you have seasons where you scale up and seasons where you scale down and respond to that.
Yep.
You are doing so much, and you're, just talking back and forth via email and meeting you in person, you're constantly thinking. You can hear like the ideas churning in your head and
Hopefully,
just going, yeah. And so we always like to ask our guests a couple of questions, and one of them is like, what is one challenge that you're facing that you're still trying to mull over and come up with a solution for?
What is one challenge? Well, if you give me a couple of minutes, I could probably come up with a ton of them. For the short term, I think we've been putting a lot of focus towards how do we truly get economies of scale.
Yeah.
We're at 2, and this year we'll have 3 locations.
Okay.
That are all at least an acre. What's the smartest way to share tools and resources and some of the fixed costs between them? And also, what's the smartest way to divide up the crops?
Yeah.
As well as the sales channels.
Yeah.
Because not every vegetable gets sold in the same way. We didn't really get into that yet, but
Okay.
we grow through, or we sell through CSA,
Yeah.
community supported agriculture, where people come and pick up a weekly box. We sell at multiple farmers markets, and we have a farm stand at our Queens site every Saturday with an
Okay.
open day where people can come up and visit the farm as well and get their hands dirty and shop at the market. And then still the majority of our produce sales are through wholesale, where we sell the vegetables and small groceries.
Wow.
So we're tweaking that and figuring out the logistics of transportation in order to get it delivered in the refrigerated vehicle. And also trying to figure out what the exact mix should be at each farm, because that dictates what you order for seeds in January and what you start in February and March and April, and then what you actually plant in the ground.
So you're looking at maybe at one location doing a different mix than another. Is that because of what's wanted in the space that's around it, or is it based on how are you deciding that?
It's very multivariate.
Okay.
There is demand and culture around the location for sure, especially with our CSAs, because that's typically neighborhood people in community that come and pick up. It is disease prevention and risk.
Yeah.
And then also sharing of overhead and tools, and maybe you invest in one tool but you can only afford, or you only want to buy one instead of 3 of them, so you don't have one at each farm. So then you maybe plant the applicable plants around it so you can get the most use out of that tool, or all those things.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I know from where I live in central Pennsylvania, and we have multiple different farmers around us, family farms, and they have the benefit of going, hey, you need a combine, okay, then they share that cost. But for you don't have that luxury of having other farmers that you can work back and forth with. It's all internal. I'm sure that throws a bunch of challenges for you on having to be self-reliant and self-sufficient, and not having that network of other farmers to be a part of.
True. It's not your traditional rural farming community. There is a pretty vibrant urban farming community, but of course it is difficult to share tools like that because you have to drive it around, or sometimes they're really large. There's one example, I don't know where it is these days, but it used to rotate around to some community farms in our location. It was a bicycle-powered compost sifter.
Oh, wow.
Really cool trommel system with all the different belts and everything hooked up to a old exercise bike. So that was one example of a sifting mechanism that was shared. But then also at the kind of micro level, it made me think when you said that actually we do share with our neighbors quite a bit, because right here in the Navy Yard and on the floor below us are multiple furniture builders and people with tools, and it's not every day, but there's definitely moments when you run downstairs because you just need something that you don't have, and you can buy, whether it's a ladder or a specific drill or a vise or something like that.
Yeah.
So we do definitely interact with their neighbors, but at a different level. Obviously, we're not sharing the combine.
Yeah.
And one other thing that we do, there's a chocolate company right here in the Navy Yard, just maybe a couple 100 yards from us.
Oh, wow.
And they have a significant waste stream from their chocolate making process, which is the spent chocolate husk.
Yeah.
It's like small little particles of the beans and the pods and the husks.
Yeah.
So we go and pick that up, because otherwise they wouldn't know where to put it. Potentially it would be a cost or end up in the landfill, which is not good. And we'll pick up about 10,000 pounds of that per year through that and another chocolate maker. And we use that as mulches and different additions to our nutrient amendment, because it has nutrient for our soil too.
Yeah, and I know for a couple years when I'd go into Lowe's or Home Depot, I would see chocolate.
Oh yeah,
the husk or whatever they call it.
It's a gardening product.
Now and it smells chocolatey when you spread it. I've done that.
Yeah, but it smells for like 3 days and then it starts to fizzle out.
Yeah.
It decomposes actually quite
chocolate,
quickly.
come back.
Right. Yeah, it's a fun thing for the children's group that come up here too, and for tours, because you can often smell it if you just put it down.
Yeah.
And then, of course you get the question, like, is the lettuce going to taste chocolatey or whatever?
It'd be a new hybrid.
It's on our garlic right now, so I don't know how that would garlicky chocolate. No, but it breaks down and it's only the core components that are going to end up going into the plant.
Now, how are you finding purpose personally in this process of doing this? And it sounds like it's a pretty dramatic shift from what you did before. So how is this bringing fulfillment and joy and all of those things that reinforce purpose in your life?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple elements that spring into my mind in terms of purpose. One is all the people that are around us.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by an amazing group of people, my partners and co-founders, our employees, the people we interact with and do business with. They're terrific, and it's really energizing and uplifting to be interacting with people that care, environmentalists, people that are entrepreneurs, that are solving problems, that are questioning and engaging in these things. And the other thing is the motion, and also just the plants themselves. Knowing that we're growing super nutritious, super healthy, high quality plants, and growing tens of thousands of pounds for them and distributing them through New York City and getting them into people's mouths and bellies. That's also like really, really fulfilling. And also just to taste them on your own and bring them home and cook with them is also
that's super cool.
Important.
Yeah, super, super cool. Our final question for this segment is, what's the next big goal you have for Brooklyn Grange? As a team, as an organization, what is that big thing in front of you? You just go, we've got to get there.
Well, imminently we are building our third farm, and we're going to get that open. And beyond that, we have very broad and ever-changing goals.
Yeah.
We are we're looking to do more and more of what we're doing. We're looking to cover more roofs, touch more people. And especially really expand our design and build business, because that is it's very scalable, and there's a lot of spaces. Actually, people might think that our core of our expansion is 100% food,
Yeah.
But there's actually a lot of spaces now that we've become wise and learned about this and learned some lessons where we'll look at a space and say, that's actually not the best place to try to set up a farm.
Yeah.
It might be a perfect, beautiful roof, but this could be an amenity to your building. This could be a place where the hundreds of people that live below it could use this to get outside and share the space, maybe grow some small amounts of vegetables, but set up decks and nature walks and wildflower plots and things like that. So there's just a lot of potential for all of that. And the core of that is making our cities more livable.
Super cool. We'll be right back with Ben Flanner to go deeper into the story of Brooklyn Grange, farming in an urban setting, and we're going to actually be bringing in your questions from Facebook and Instagram into the conversation in a few moments, too. Today's episode is being sponsored by our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com, Floxy and Mighty Travels. We're going to take a moment and share a little bit about them and how they can help you. One of my favorite things to do is to travel. But often I am spending hours, maybe even days, looking through travel searches for the right airfare. Our friends over at Mighty Travels make it so much easier. You can go in, set your desired location when you want to go, and get notifications sent to you via email and text message so that you can grab those special deals when they're there. If you want to save money, up to even like $190 per ticket, Mighty Travels is the place to check out. So swing on over to mightytravels.com/jumblethink to learn more about how you can access some great notifications to get the best fares for your trip. Again, that's mightytravels.com/jumblethink. Go on over, check them out, and start saving on your trips. Today's episode is also sponsored by our friends over at Floxy. Here's a little bit more about them. You have a killer idea for the perfect graphic or website, but you feel stuck and overwhelmed by the cost and skills it takes to create those ideas. Maybe you lack the time you need to create them. No matter the obstacle, it's time to get that idea created. And our friends over at Floxy can help you create those killer graphics, the perfect website, or even create the copy that's used on your next ad, all at a low cost, starting at $349 per month. Their on-demand, unlimited graphic design, web, and copywriting are backed by a 7-day money-back guarantee for all new accounts. And you'll be working with a dedicated US-based project manager assigned to your account. There are no hidden fees, and billing is month to month. So check them out for your next project and for the project after that too. You can find them at floxy.com, FLOCKSY.com. We also want to thank our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com for sponsoring today's episode. Here's a little bit more about them.
At the dawn of the 19th century, forward-thinking people moved to the commercial centers of Europe. Moving into the 20th century, America welcomed millions into the land of freedom and opportunity. It is now the 21st century. Many of the successes and fortunes of our generations will be made in China. To learn how you can seize opportunity in China, follow the Opportunity in China podcast. The Opportunity in China podcast is available anywhere podcasts are streamed, or you can visit our website at opportunityinchina.com.
Now let's continue our conversation with Ben Flanner. We are back with Ben, and we're going so much deeper into this conversation. Ben, before we get rolling on this new segment, I want people to know how they can find and connect with you. So how can they do that?
Well, they can visit our website at www.brooklyngrangefarm.com. We also have a really fun Instagram, which is at Brooklyn Grange. I think those are probably the two best ways. And they can also just come up and visit.
So cool.
That's the third.
Yeah. We'll put those links in the episode notes. Super easy to find it. So wherever you're listening, just check those out, and you can click right there and get there.
Just to elaborate a little bit on our website, we have links to our workshop series, which there's many really interesting topics. We have yoga once a week in the summer, and we also do tours, and then also every Saturday is an open day.
Wow. At
our Long Island City farm. So there's lots of ways to sort of engage once you get to the website as well.
You mentioned open days. Is that days where people can actually come and pick their own produce, or are they just coming to like a farmer market kind of setup?
A little bit of both. We do small bits of pick.
Okay.
For a couple different crops. It's fun.
Oh, that's so cool.
In general, it's mostly to shop at the market, but there's also ways to get involved and get your hands dirty and help out a little bit too.
Can people volunteer to become a part of this, or is it mostly just employees that are working up here?
We are fully run by employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. We had reached out via social channels, opened up the conduit for questions. When we got a couple back that I really liked, and I wanted to ask you them, and I know that I think they're pretty good questions. So, first question,
Great.
First question comes from our friend Rebecca. She says, "I'm interested to know how he waters and how much it costs."
That is a great question. Water probably could have been on my list of things that I'm currently trying to tackle as well. That's an ongoing sort of challenge. We water in many different ways across the farm. We have drip irrigation. We have aerial irrigation. We have lots of different timers and whatnot. And we're basically constantly tweaking them and trying to monitor the moisture levels to reduce it or to put it at the minimum that it possibly can be at.
Yeah.
So certain beds might, if we're germinating seeds and it's the middle of July, we're going to water those beds about 4 times a day.
Yeah.
For short intervals. And then at different parts of the year, if it's drip irrigation where the water is going to sort of sit there and saturate a little bit longer, it might be as little as once a day. And of course, if it rains and it's wet, then we don't water at all. And the other question was what it costs. And that's actually a kind of a great moment to talk about our water system as well, at least in New York City, because this is a little known fact that for every $1 that we spend on water, we actually spend another $2 on our sewage system fees.
Wow.
On the sewage charge.
Okay.
So it basically means you use $1 worth of water, you pay $3.
Okay.
If you're just looking at the actual price structure of the water itself. And that's with the assumption that everyone in the city, it averages to about 100 gallons per day per human in the city, is going to be basically putting the water back down into the system,
right.
Between the sewage system and whatnot. So our water bills are actually a bit higher than we first modeled them to be.
Okay.
With that information, and it might be in the realm of maybe about $4,000 to $6,000 per farm.
Okay.
In terms of our total use.
Is that per month or per year?
Per season.
Per season. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, can you negotiate with the city or whoever provides the water service to say, hey, we're not putting this back into the ground, into the sewage, to get better rates because of that?
Really good question. We've heard rumor that type of thing has been negotiated in one-offs and possibly in other cities. Other cities actually have tax systems that are set up that revolve around the surface area, which is directly correlated to the amount of stormwater that goes down. So then if you put up a green roof, you can have a much stronger case to get a tax reduction.
Yeah.
We have not been able to, and partly because typically when you use water, it's sub-metered and there's a bunch of layers that go in between it. So it might be a bureaucratic challenge, but definitely would be in the spirit of the ruler of the price or the law, that some sort of reduction could be made, and it's definitely something we've been thinking about.
Well, and it seems like that would be a common good kind of thing where you're actually helping the system function better based on coming up with innovative strategies to solve these problems.
It has scalability, because if you're mitigating millions of gallons of stormwater per year with a green roof, then if you do use water and it's being absorbed and evaporating, it's not going back down into the system. It definitely has a case.
Yes, absolutely. I, of course, lived in Northern California for several years. Rain the lack of rainwater is a big issue. And out there, one of the things that they do is collect rainwater for watering your grass or your garden, that kind of thing. Have you guys messed with that at all, with rainwater storage, and how does that work with farming?
Yeah, we've played with little bits of rainwater capture. It is a slightly larger engineering challenge than I've been able to take on. Basically, the whole roof collects as much as we can.
Okay.
And then when we hit a maximum saturation, some water does go down the drains.
Okay.
And we want to minimize that. And we've actually been putting a lot of effort towards the structure of our soil.
Okay.
In order to hold the water, to maximize the water holding capacity of our soil, and also to minimize the water permeability rate, which is actually a velocity. It's actually the speed at which the water passes through our soil.
Wow.
So if we can slow down that speed, then we'll hold more overall.
So you're thinking different ways of solving it, where the obvious way that someone like me would think is just capture the water, but actual soil composition makes that much of a difference on how it absorbs the water and how it holds it?
Oh, yeah. Soil composition can really move the needle. And then also I agree with you about the actual physical capture, but it also becomes a lot more complicated. For example, one of our roofs has about 14 drains.
Okay.
So it has 14 low points, and then you need to figure out what are you going to do with the water once it goes down a level into the building.
Yeah.
Do you rent a space, or do you immediately pump it back up, and then where do you store it? And it becomes quite heavy if it's a substantial amount of water.
Yeah.
Which might require different permissions or engineering and locations to put the tanks. So really, that is something that we would love to pursue with a grant.
Yeah,
because we need a little bit of help.
That sounds like a
to
logistical nightmare to
do
actually.
It right. Yeah. A great challenge. It would be so fun.
Yeah.
It'd be so fun to figure it out, and it would be awesome. We actually do plan to do some consulting at a space in the future where they will be building a massive water cistern underneath the building.
Okay.
And we very much look forward to partaking in that and learning from it.
Creating your own aquifer, if you will.
Almost, yeah.
In the vein of water, one of our other listeners, Jackson, he asked, how do you prevent water damage to the building structure, like things like seepage, rust, mildew, rot? How do you solve that problem?
Well, that problem is basically solved by the green roof industry, which came before us.
Okay.
But the trick is to have a pitch to the roof, which all roofs do. Roofs aren't really flat. They all have a small pitch, and then they have drains at the low point.
Yeah.
And then to install a proper green roof system that affords or allows for drainage and for the water to move into those drains when it's there.
Yeah. And then how do you minimize the risk with load, with the weight of dirt, with soil, the things that you have to put on here on the roof to make this space work for you? How do you navigate those issues?
The load is a structural question. Structural engineers can come in and look at a roof that we're considering to put a green roof on, or that a client is considering to install a green roof on. And basically, they can quite quickly and efficiently assess the strength of the roof.
Okay.
And they look at it in terms of a unit, which is pounds per square foot of load, the carrying capacity or load that it can handle. And we know exactly what the soil weighs wet. Keyword wet. We always look at the saturated weight, not the dry weight, obviously. And then we can just back it into that and then ensure that it works. And there's also a lot of safety buffer built in.
Okay.
For snow, blizzards, people, all those things.
Yeah.
No one's going to want to sign off on that unless they're 100% confident that the amount of weight is much less than the capacity of the roof. Yeah. And it's obviously very important for all parties involved.
Yeah. On a business side, do you have to go and get special permits to then put a farm like this on a roof? Do you have to? There's all kinds of business licenses out there, but does the city regulate this at all, or how do you have to work through that?
Well, the actual act of farming does not require any substantial permitting. However, running a business and occupying a space does.
Yeah.
So we have to go through the usual sort of hoops with registering our space and the fact that the business is here.
Yeah.
The green roof, in terms of installing passive green roofs or green roofs that don't have a lease on them, the law gets a little bit more vague in terms of what all needs to be filed. It depends on the building and the size of it and the depth and a couple other variables.
Yeah. Jackson also asked about bees.
This guy's got a lot of questions.
He's got good questions. He also wanted to know a little bit about bees and how they work into your system of agriculture here. So his literal question was, how have you ever housed bees on your rooftop along your farms to this point? Was it worthwhile? Did you see noticeable increases in yield versus the effort to keep bees?
Yes, we actually have 2 beehives up here. I'll show
Okay.
them to you before you go.
Yeah.
We have another couple of beehives on our other roof in Long Island City. And then across the city, we actually have approximately 30 beehives.
Wow.
We do some consulting where we'll install bees on clients' spaces, like in their backyard or balcony or roof or something like that if they have a space.
Yeah.
And then also we have several hives of our own that we take care of and harvest honey from.
Wow.
In terms of the yields, they tend to be pretty strong on our roof, but the average urban beehive, we're frankly still collecting data on it.
Okay.
And there's a lot of bees across New York City, but we are still kind of figuring out some best practices and exactly really kind of what the best density is for them and what types of forages they like. But yes, we are very big fans of bees, and we also do a beekeeping. We have several beekeeping workshops
Okay.
during the season, which are really popular. And our honey is very popular. And then we also have a bee education program
Wow.
where people meet every other week for much of the season and really get like a solid beekeeping introduction so they can go out and do it themselves.
Yeah.
It's remarkably popular right now.
So cool. When I think of New York and bees, I think of the TV show Elementary, where
Oh, yeah.
they have a beehive.
Or
in
Sherlock or
Brooklyn.
something
yeah,
like that.
Sherlock, yeah. On the top of the
Heard of
roof.
it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The last question from our audience we're going to ask today comes from Phoebe, and she asks, why is this an important problem to solve for you personally?
I guess I'd say, what is this? Not quite sure what this is.
The farm.
The farm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I don't really consider it as a problem. As we work and focus on the business, I really kind of just think about it as running a business and
Okay.
just doing what our mission, doing what we want to do as a mission, and also just more and more improvement and growth and figuring out what's next. It didn't quite start as your classic, what's the problem and what's the solution?
Okay.
Not in your classic way. I'm sure there's elements of it, but also related to problems. There are daily problems, and I think we're constantly sort of solving little problems.
Yeah.
And I've always referred to that as a really important trait for an entrepreneur to have that ability to enjoy
Yeah.
and really focus on problems and figure out, like, enjoy solving them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes even coming across them in a weird way.
Creating them and having to.
Yeah.
I want to thank Rebecca, Phoebe, and Jackson for asking those questions.
Yeah, it's great.
It's so fun to have you a part of the conversation. I hope that you enjoyed those answers. In a moment, we'll be back to do rapid fire questions and finish the conversation with our guest today, Ben Flanner. If you're new to the jumbleThink podcast, we want to thank you for tuning into today's episode. We still have our rapid fire questions coming up, so stay tuned for those. You might be wondering, what is jumbleThink? And we have the podcast here where we talk about dreams and ideas, but we also do more than that. We have idea camps to help you turn those dreams and ideas into reality. We also have some other great events we're working on, both virtual and in person. We can also help you with consulting and strategy around idea formation and innovation strategies. To learn more about jumbleThink beyond the podcast, and to subscribe and stay up to date on the jumbleThink podcast, head on over to jumbleThink.com to learn more. We also want to thank our sponsors for today's episode, OpportunityInChina.com, Floxy, and Mighty Travels. Here's a little bit more from opportunityinchina.com. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospects? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path you should take? Well, you are not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit opportunityinchina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China, or if you have a bachelor's degree already, opportunityinchina.com provides access to jobs in the educational sector all across China. Now, working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network and bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization. And it will ultimately open up doors you never knew existed. So seize your opportunity now. Visit their website for more information at opportunityinchina.com. They also have a great podcast. Simply search for Opportunity in China podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We also want to thank our friends over at Mighty Travels for sponsoring today's episode. Here's more about them. Are you an adventurer that's ready for your next trip? Well, our friends over at Mighty Travels want to make it so much easier for you. Most of us spend so much time getting onto our devices and searching for the perfect airfare, only to find out later that we missed a better deal. Well, let's stop wasting that money and wasting your time and start scoring great price tickets, often saving around $190 per ticket, and flying the flights we want to fly to the destinations where we want to go. Mighty Travels will help you by getting deals directly to your inbox and to your phone so that you never miss a great deal on the perfect flight. Swing on over to mightytravels.com/jumblethink. That's mightytravels.com/jumblethink to learn more about how you can start saving on booking the perfect fares for your next trip. We also want to thank our friends over at Floxy for sponsoring today's episode. Here's more about them. Floxy is doing some really, really cool stuff. Did you ever need a graphic designed, a website developed, or copywritten, but found that the designers and developers were too expensive and often took a long time to get your project completed? Well, Floxy is your answer. Floxy is your unlimited graphic design, web development, and copywriting team. Plans start at $349 per month with no hidden fees, month-to-month billing, and you can cancel at any time. So check them out for your next project and for the project after that at floxy.com. That's FLOCKSY.com. And let them know that JumbleThink sent you. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions with our guest, Ben Flanner. We are back with Ben Flanner for our final segment. Before we get into rapid fire questions, I come from a faith-based tradition, and part of the faith that I hold dear to me says that we need to be good stewards of what's around us, whether it's the earth, whether it's the resources we're given. How much of what you're doing is reclaiming or reframing environmental issues and coming up with solutions to everyone's talking, we've got to make changes, but you're making changes. So for you, how has that played into your story?
I think that's a general ethos that I very much share with you, and it kind of weaves through the story on and off in different ways. But I think it's very much a part of the whole thing of the sort of the resource conservation was the examples were myriad. When especially as we started this business, we're greening the city, we're reducing our food transportation miles, we're teaching people about food, we're creating this green space that's almost like a park in some ways. Healthy food, treating our bodies well, respecting Mother Nature. It's really everything, and I talk about Mother Nature a lot, and just like the value of and just the amazing things that are on this earth. When you take the time to just slow down and look at them, sometimes like the insanely bright pink in a watermelon radish, or like that crazy sweetness in a Japanese sweet potato, like naturally occurring. So I just am a big fan of appreciating all that stuff and respecting it and taking care of it.
What would be one challenge to everyone listening about you're obviously working in urban farming. We've made that very clear throughout the episode.
No secret there.
Yeah, no secret. If somebody's thinking about how they can be a better steward or how they can respond to issues around them, and for you, you've solved two major problems for yourself. One, dissatisfaction in what you were doing and creating a new path that brought satisfaction. And two, solving a problem, which was how can we use the resources around us, a rooftop, to generate something that is good for the community. What would be the challenge for people listening that you would say, hey, this isn't just something that you have to do on a big scale or something, but what would you challenge them to do?
It's a great question, because the way our systems are set up on this earth and in our country, it's so hard to like really revamp.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you can just stop driving, or it's not like you can just go plant a forest somewhere, or like, you know, there's not a lot of macro things that are that easy to do. But I've always, you know, it's kind of the way we run the business too, is that you there's big things and there's little things, and especially if we're talking about little things, you kind of just have to keep on chipping away at it.
Yeah.
And you can't give up.
Yeah. And
you can't ignore things. And I think it's very valuable to really reflect on your own life and little sacrifices. Let's just say that you're a person that is like really upset about fossil fuel use. If that's you, figure out how to reduce your use, even if it's 10% or 15% or 20%, or maybe one day you'll change your transportation or something. But even just chipping away at it, I think, is valuable. Of course, little things aren't going to like flip a whole system upside down, but I think if there's a goal that you have, it's kind of like if you make it a way of life and you just really look at things from the top down, there's always something you can do.
Yeah. And
then you feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah.
You know, and does it move the needle? We don't know. But if everybody did it, it would move the needle.
Yeah.
So.
Many little things make massive difference.
Yeah.
And so if we all start taking that shift of saying, what can I do, even if it's small, that will add up to something bigger.
Mm-hmm. And for example, there's some really inspiring things going on with food waste right now, zero waste, reusing food, looking at our whole distribution stream and figuring out where the waste occurs. And the majority of our waste actually occurs in people's refrigerators.
Yeah.
It's at the end user.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that people can do to learn about salvaging that last thing on its last day, you know, before it goes bad, and figuring out how to cook it so it's safely before it goes bad.
Yeah.
Or swapping in different types of vegetables and maybe meats in different recipes.
Yeah.
Using different grains, things like that. Not being afraid to try too.
Yeah.
You know?
So good. Well, Ben, it's that time. We're doing rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
I'm ready. I think. I'll try.
Our first question is, as a child, what did you want to do when you grew up?
I think I wanted to be a baseball player. We'd go out and play catch every day.
Yeah. Super cool. Now, what is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea and dream and they don't know where to start?
I typically am pretty pragmatic with that type of person, because I just don't like people dreaming like crazy if they never do start. You know, it helps to start somewhere. So I guess try to help kind of break it down into its components and start asking a lot of questions about like, oh, and then you'll do this or do that. And I really do like getting detailed and granular, and I think that can help people to make dreams come true, to go through those exercises too.
Yeah.
Of going through granular details.
For sure. Love that. What is one big lie or misconception that you think people have about entrepreneurship?
I feel like in general, people are pretty aware of the challenges of entrepreneurship, at least around me. Like, well, you must be busy. You're working a lot, you know, all that kind of stuff. But just thinking back to it, I mean, I guess there's sort of a cliche where someone will say, I'm just going to start my own thing. But I think really the the short of it is the sheer quantity of work, and
Yeah.
the fact that the work doesn't really stop. So one has to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And prepared for it, and be willing to tackle it with a positive mentality.
Yeah. Truly no rest for the weary.
Even when you are weary. I never quite understood that expression.
No, for sure. What's one change you'd like to see in the world?
Lately I've my brain continues to sort of focus back towards income distribution, income equality, minimum wage. I think the changes that have been starting to occur are really positive, and I think minimum wage needs to grow a lot faster than the inflation rate for a while.
Yeah.
To kind of start to balance out the scales a little bit. I think it'll be better for our society as a whole.
Now, you may not see this, but I know others do. You are impacting this world in creative ways by what you're doing through Brooklyn Grange. But what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want it to be defined by?
I never really think about my legacy. I think it would be great if it is that this company made New York a better place. That inspired people, hopefully across the whole world, to do similar and different things, and that we did it while treating people pretty decently.
Yeah. Yeah. What inspires you?
What inspires me? I'm always inspired by passion and details.
Okay.
People that just get granular with things and just get really kind of fringely focused on things, I've always found to be really admirable and interesting.
Yeah.
And intriguing. Yeah, definitely. That inspires me. My work also inspires me. Growing food really inspires me.
Yeah.
Tasting vegetables really inspire me. Colors, flavors. Guess there's a lot of things.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that's not on the sheet. That's
Okay.
not one I've ever asked before because it's just about you. You grow a lot of food. What's the one food that it's like your candy that you grow?
It changes every year. I really love a good Hakurei turnip. That's a small white turnip, not the purple top. It's typically about the size of a golf ball. And when you really nail it, it just has this crispiness to it, a sweetness to it. It's not like candy. It's not like a sweet potato. But it's very sweet, and it doesn't have like that sort of, call it turnipiness. I frequently refer to it as the gateway turnip. And it's just a really, really great vegetable. It has a great top, too, that you can eat.
Nice. How do you define success?
Success is so multi-layered. I think one's goals change, and they definitely change with their life.
Yeah.
As their life evolves. And I think success, I feel like a large part of it is actually related to contentment, to feeling like, yes, I'm doing what I generally want to be doing. I'm doing okay at it. Things are all right around me, and I'm happy. I definitely don't define it in any specific metric or, a thing that you can tick.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I like that. What is one trend you are currently excited about?
I've always been a bit of a hobbyist, and it's easy for the years to go by and work a lot. But I've resumed playing a lot of ping pong and table tennis, and I think that it is becoming a little bit more popular. A lot of people are playing it, and tables are showing up in new places. And I'm pretty excited about that trend, actually, that New York City seems to have a burgeoning ping pong industry.
What's one habit that you find helpful in your life as an entrepreneur?
A habit? Actually, that's an interesting one, because the first thing that comes to my mind is actually something that I would like to evolve into. Because as an entrepreneur, it is so easy to have your days be kind of unstructured.
Yeah.
Especially in the earlier stages of our business. I used to joke that I would have no idea what I was going to do that day. You get up, you just get at it, and then you get a curveball, or you get another curveball, or a phone call, or whatever.
Constant response to everything.
Yeah. And as our business has matured, it's become a little bit more organized. So I do have a schedule, and I can anticipate certain meetings or things that I have to do. But it's been recommended to me, and I do think that there is some value in routine. And I would like to do just a little bit. I'm not a routine person, but I'd like to develop a couple of them.
Yeah.
Because I think they can be healthy in some ways for sort of balance of the soul and the body and whatnot.
Yeah. What is one thing you wish you would have known when you started out with Brooklyn Grange?
One thing that I should have known.
Or wish you would have known?
Well, that's a tough one to answer because I guess what I start thinking about is like regrets or something, but I don't really have many regrets with what we've done. We've learned so much about crop production and profitabilities of different crops and everything. I mean, I don't really wish I knew it when I started because then I wouldn't have had all that fun of learning it. And not being as knowledgeable for a while, but obviously that if we could just snap our fingers and be right here, and I think there is actually a lot more information available to farmers starting out now. That would be an interesting one.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Well, I always say this: I'd be a plumber.
Really?
I love irrigation. I love moving water. And calculating flow rates and pressures and stuff like that. And I look at like a plumbing exercise. We can actually see it out our window, the World Trade Center or something like that. Imagine like setting up all the water lines or something in a massive structure like that. I think it would be a blast.
I think it's probably easier to do it now than it was back when they built that building.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And our final rapid fire question is, what is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
I feel like I really get excited about regional economies and circular economies. And I very much value the ability of certain regions to produce things and ship them, and I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. But I often find myself looking at different economies, communities, especially ones that might be struggling economically, and seeing dollars exiting their community and going to another place that doesn't need them as badly. And I guess I just think about that in terms of, I feel like it's sort of a self-respect and also a important balancing that is needed for our country and our world, for people to figure that out a little bit and figure out how to I guess it's very vague, but to sort of keep their economies together and create a little bit more regional and local accountability, especially in how things are made, produced, consumed, etc.
Yeah, love that for sure. Ben, thank you so much for telling us the story of Brooklyn Grange, giving us some insights into what it takes to do what you're doing, and encouraging all of us that we can make a difference in the choices we make with our food choices, with our environment around us, with the people around us. Your story is truly one of inspiration for many.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Once again, we want to thank our guest today, Ben Flanner, CEO and co-founder of Brooklyn Grange. You can find all of their links in the episode notes. Make sure you go connect with them, and if you're in New York City, go check out what they're doing. It's super cool. Their locations are crazy cool, and Ben and his team are just incredibly fun and nice people. We also want to thank our sponsors for today's episode, OpportunityInChina.com, Floxy, and Mighty Travels. Go support them. They're doing great things that will help you in your journey too. As we wrap up today's episode, we always like to leave you with a final thought. My final thought for you today is I want to encourage you. Sometimes big ideas, big dreams are crazy. I think of Ben and Brooklyn Grange. When people must have heard that idea, they must have said, this is crazy. No one's ever done this. Why would you put a farm on the top of a warehouse? They had tons of challenges to overcome to make it a reality. And yet they persevered, they came up with solutions, and they solved a problem that needs solving. You too could be like Ben, and you could be innovating in a new space, creating new ways to accomplish amazing things. And if it's not you, then who's going to do it? So I want to encourage you today, as you think about your dreams and ideas, if they seem crazy, if they seem far-fetched, if there are tons of obstacles in the way, still push forward. Still take the chance and risk to make them a reality. It'll be worth it, and the world needs you to step into that reality. So get out there today, dream big, and change the world around you.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.